New York was like really going to a career gem.
Now you are CFO at Garex Industry, but at the same time, you are really young. How you feel about that?
And when I look at my own career, say most of the information that I learned, I don't think I could even learn at university.
So, hi everyone, here it's Simone Andrea, and we are today here with Eser Gari from Istanbul. How are you, Eser? How is it going over there?
Hey guys, it's going great. Good to see you. We're just sort of getting over the quarantine. Restaurants are opening back up, so can't complain.
Thanks for being here. And as usual, we do a brief introduction of our speaker. So you are in your early 30s. You were born in Turkey, but when you were just a kid, you moved to the US because you won the green card lottery with some members of your family as well. And you moved to Miami. Is that right?
Yep, that's true.
Then after college, you went to New York. You stayed about 7 years there and you started your professional career over there, which in the end culminated in you being the CFO of Garex Industries.
Yeah, that's true.
And then you moved back to Turkey. But we're going to talk about that later in a second. So would you do the honor?
Our first question is about your first impact with the States. So as far as I know, your first impact with the United States was not so positive. And I would like to ask you, what was the greatest shock you had?
I moved to the US as a kid, but on a kid, I think every time you change their environment very suddenly, I think there's like a sort of stress on them that there are many things that they need to sort of relearn and readjust for. One of the things that sort of impacted me when I moved to the States was the climate. So I moved from Turkey, which is like a Mediterranean climate with 4 seasons, for example, to Miami, where it's like almost 30 degrees and extremely humid year round. So when I was, for example, living in Turkey, I'd play outside a lot. I would go to places with friends. In the summertime, I would also go to hang out with friends and we could go places. Whereas in Miami, for example, I didn't want to be outside because of the humidity. And every time I was outside, I would get sunburned really quickly, which kind of trapped me at home and I didn't enjoy it. The climate surprisingly has a big impact on your lifestyle, I think. And it was like a transition that I didn't enjoy in the beginning anyway. In addition to learning a new language and living a different lifestyle, I think one of the other things that kind of bothered me about living in like a typical American city, and that's very different from Europe, is you need to drive. Like everything is based around cars and driving, and you can't really walk anywhere. So, whereas in Europe, I think you can kind of get out of your apartment. You can even walk down to a city center. Like everything is sort of arranged around like human size versus car sized. When I would come to Istanbul in the summertime, it's a big city, and there are apartment buildings, great public transportation. So I could take a bus and be somewhere central in a few minutes. I could meet up with people very easily. I could walk. Even if it was hot, it wasn't so humid as is Miami. Yeah, all that I didn't like because I like to be outside. I like to be, outdoors with friends. In the beginning, it really, I didn't enjoy it, but I adjusted, especially after getting a car in my.
And what about the culture? I know you were just a kid, so you probably didn't see there, but did you ever felt like there were two different cultures, especially when you then moved back to Turkey?
Yeah, definitely. There are huge differences between the two cultures, I think. It's difficult to sort of say or talk about the culture in the US because it's just such a diverse place, especially in the large East Coast cities like Miami and New York, especially. But I think in some way that diversity in culture kind of allows people to be very clear with each other because you need to keep things kind of simple and clear and there's no like sort of unspoken nuance, and that allows things to be simple. Like for example, in Turkey, because it's less multicultural, things can be more nuanced And because people are sort of exposed, people are exposed to the same things every day, they kind of understand each other without having to simplify the way that they sort of interact. Yeah, so that creates large differences between cultures.
Great. Regarding the topic of New York, I would like to ask you if you think that it had a really huge impact on your personality, some kind of New York thing in your personality at the moment now that you're still characterized.
It's difficult to sort of assess the way I was before I went to New York and after. But I guess if I had to sort of assess the change, is I think going to New York was like an education in of itself, but a useful education. And I think moving there made me kind of understand how the financial markets work better, how real estate works much better, how large businesses are making decisions. So I think it's made me more competent, and I think that's the advantage of going to like a multicultural global city like New York, because I think whether you like it or not, you get schooled in these cities, and you sort of learn by doing and learn by watching other very competent people that came before you, and you sort of start to rise up slowly to their level. I would say, from my experience, I think New York was like really going to a career gym, I would say. And every day you would go to the gym, bench press, learn something new, improve yourself. And I think that has an impact on both your skills. So, for example, I became really good at building Excel models for real estate finance. I learned a lot about law and legal, reading contracts, and what I'm reading in a complicated contract. I didn't have any of these skills before. And if you say, okay, well, what's the impact on your personality? I think when you're around very competent people, you become more competent, more serious, more detail oriented and conscientious yourself. And so I think, yeah, I think that's the influence that it had on my personality as well. I think a significant portion of the education, I would say like if half the education is technical, so, learning to write a formula and then combining those formulas to build like a 7-page real estate investment model is half the work. But I think the other half of the work is sort of learning to motivate yourself to be able to do that work, and understanding how to negotiate for a pay raise, for example, or understanding when you should sort of slow down, when you should speed up, how you should proceed. So I think there's like unspoken education there as well. And I think you don't learn it by kind of reading a book. You really need to sort of jump in and be exposed to it. It's sort of like an indirect knowledge. It's almost like a business cultural. How do you pick up culture? I mean, you can't really learn it. You sort of need to be exposed to it, I think.
Yeah, this also reminds me, because it's a really interesting topic, let's say what the university gives you and what you should give yourself, in a sense, because most of the times, as you said, all of the business culture, environment, how to deal, how to negotiate, that universities will not give you that, because they give you the theoretical knowledge, but you need to be able to get into the job market and do yourself, get out of your comfort zone as well. Because, of course, being on the job market is completely different than being in university.
Absolutely. I mean, you start out at the bottom. You kind of have a limited amount of time to sort of learn how things are done. So you sort of focus and work on it. And gradually, they'll give you little tools along the way to sort of allow you to keep going. And in time, yeah, you begin to hold your own. You begin to be able to process tasks. I mean, as I said, I compare it to going to the gym. Every day you bench press a little bit, and you're able to carry a little bit more weight until you're able to lift the whole organization. So definitely, I think, in fact, working and having a job in New York added more value to me than my university education. The university education, I would say, just opened the door to, I would say, like, it was sort of branding that allowed me to get that I did. But the most important part, or the most important things that I learned through actually seeing.
So I think we kind of skipped some steps, because one of our last questions, of course, would have been that would you say your education had an impact on your career? And
you definitely answered to this question.
And we're talking about this. So kind of, let's say, just summing it up, let's say your education gave you the tools and opened the doors for the job market, but then you went there yourself and dealt with it and grew in particular. Also, I think it's really important to learn how to take responsibilities as well, because of course, in the job market, in the workplace, you're talking about money, not only your money, not only your wage, but also the shareholders' money and whoever invested in the company. So if you lose that money, probably has a lot of impact versus just losing your own. So I guess it's a lot about taking responsibilities.
So personally, my previous university experience in Italy gave me some theoretical knowledge. I don't want to say that it was useless. It has a really great impact on my mindset, but nothing so practical about what I do in the working environment. While here in the UK, I found some practical knowledge that I can apply for my career, for all the things that I do, for this project, actually, also for this project. So I think that I agree with you, with both of you. Whatever, it's okay.
Yeah,
We would see.
absolutely.
I mean, I also had an experience in New York. I also worked in New York, and that was crucial to better know all the concepts that I'm studying now in this university. So I don't know if that had a huge impact on how I approach this university once I arrived here, but maybe it could be. However, I totally agree, 100% agree about all what we said about New York, because definitely that kind of environment can really support you in putting yourself in the right direction, doing the right thing, being motivated, and being constantly challenged by other people. So it's a really, really good place to grow and to be ambitious.
Yeah, absolutely.
So since you both guys works, of course, you say more than him. But
Of
would you
course.
say it was? Would you say it was? As I understood, you were talking a lot about the, let's say, good competition in a sense, because you're always challenged to do better. But I guess my question would be: was it really all good competition, or was there's a lot of pressure as well on you guys when you were working?
I think in a place like New York, if you're not able to sort of deliver result, then there's always someone who can replace you, and that fear sort of also keeps you going because the wages are decent and you don't want to lose your job. And so there's absolutely that pressure, I would say. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's like any I didn't feel any more pressure than I felt at university before an exam. So there were times when I did feel a lot of pressure or I did feel under stress, but I think that's just kind of natural. I think every time I felt that stress, it was kind of a push for me to exercise my mind and my understanding time even more. So I would say there was pressure, yes, but in the moment it didn't feel so positive. But afterward, when I look at all those moments, I think once I overcame that pressure, I either learned something or understood something, or I was able to process some information faster, better. So I would say that pressure was positive because it pushed me to move in the right direction.
Of course.
Yeah, this question takes us to the next question, which is your decision to come back to your home country. And can you tell us a little bit more about this decision?
Yeah, sure. So I always had wondered, after moving out of Istanbul, what my life would have been like if I would have lived in Turkey. And so when I had the opportunity, while I was doing my master's, I saw an exchange program to be able to come to Sabancı University. It was a great decision, I think. As I said, without knowing it, I made the correct decision.
But there was something really interesting that you said, whether you're thinking about how your life would have been if you hadn't moved in the first place. Would you think that you would have achieved the same successes if you just stayed in Istanbul?
Probably not. I think if I had stayed in, so I know this because I actually have several friends whom I was childhood friends with. I mean, it's difficult to compare, obviously, but I think they mostly kind of stayed within Turkey. They I mean, they have successful careers, don't get me wrong, but at least when I look at my life experience, I would say that it's been a more adventure career than what they have done. So I would say that at least from my perspective, I would have been less successful, and definitely exposure to the US improved my chances of achieving better results. So, for example, in my work in New York, I did the research for several articles in the real estate section for the New York Times. I worked at a private equity firm that was bidding to become the second Amazon HQ in New Jersey, and we were actually one of the finalists that were shortlisted. Finally, we didn't get it. Queens got it, but then even the Queens project was canceled. So I would say that all these achievements I definitely reached if I had been living in Istanbul.
Speaking of these successes, the one that you mentioned with the real estate analysis that has been published in the New York Times, what are the three key ingredients for reaching such a big success?
Yeah, so level one, I would say, is I think education really manages to open doors for you because I think having that brand, that education on your resume really helps you, really allows people to take you seriously, to open doors for you, to admit you in places that many people aren't admitted. And so I managed to get a great job with a consulting firm in New York who consults to some of the largest real estate developers in New York City. And this company's research and information was being published in the New York Times regularly. And so, as an analyst working there, obviously they didn't give me this research right away. But once I gained the trust and I was able to kind of carry my own weight, I started to receive assignments in that were going to be published. And I actually got to meet the editors. I got to meet the writers who write these articles. And I would deliver the research to them. I would answer their questions. I would do analysis, charts, data. I would say the key ingredient to sort of reach the success is basically you got to start with the end in mind. So I knew that I wanted to kind of get into private equity and consulting areas, and I knew that I wanted to specialize in real estate. So I started to kind of, as I like to call it, go to the gym on this sort of field, educate myself, learn, undersell, how to do detailed analysis, numbers, and where to get information, how to get information, all of it. Once I was ready, I actually created a portfolio of all my work and I started to apply to jobs. I would say that reaching these sort of positions is like scoring a basketball goal or maybe something like fishing. It's more about the preparation that you do before, but the process itself is very quick once all the things are in the right place. And I think it all sort of starts with your aim, the goal that you want to reach so that you can work toward that direction. So I think that's the key. Just put your eye on target and then walk toward that target. And it's usually an uphill process, especially in a place like New York where human labor is really valuable. I think they're hungry for talent. I would.
If I may just, I'm sorry if I'm monopolizing the discussion, but it was there's something that really interested me, and it's something that you mentioned in the beginning. So about the university, the degree just being, let's say, a door opener in a sense. So I just wanted to know where you stand in that kind of debate, because there's a huge debate about whether the degree itself is just, let's say, a piece of paper, and the value of that piece of paper is where it can lead you, or whether it's actually a sign of the education that you received and the quality of the education you received.
I'm sure there are instances where the education that you receive is super valuable. So, for example, doctors and maybe another field where you get most of your experience in school. But as far as I can tell, in business, especially in finance, it's just numbers. If you type it wrong, you can click delete, restart. And because the process isn't it's something that you can sort of redo over and over again until you get it right. I think that most of the knowledge that you gain on the job. That's what I've seen, and that's sort of been my experience. The only thing that education I think validates. I think it's an indication to the employer that this person is a high IQ person, that he is able to process information at a certain level, and he was able to pass through the trials that this university threw at him, and he didn't quit, give up. He was able to pass it. He got his, and I think that's the largest value add to employers. And the education itself really helps. I won't discount it, but as I said, 90% of the information is lost by the graduate and 6 months out. Once you have that very valuable diploma, then it's sort of like it more signals to the employer, I think, that, okay, I have an IQ of at least 120. I'm able to process information at a certain rate where I will be able to handle, let's say, analyzing how much rents are rising in the meatpacking district in New York City. And so you can trust. And it's not just IQ. I shouldn't boil it down to that, because you could give everybody an IQ test and someone with a very high IQ, should he get the job? I think it's also IQ and conscientious tenacity, the ability to sort of overcome challenges, the ability to learn quickly. I think all of these skills are tested in university, and I think that's that indicator gives the most is the most important flag or brand or whatever you want to call it to the employer, I would.
So you would say it's more about the university doesn't, what the university gives is not the knowledge, but is how to learn. They teach you, rather, they don't teach you things, they teach you how to learn things.
You may know how to learn things entering university. I think it's more weeding out people who couldn't resist pressure.
Okay.
So
And
dealing with a specific kind of environment, I think.
exactly. So at least this is my theory. And I think at least for me, if when I was looking to hire people in companies, the university education to me indicated to me that a certain person was able to take a certain amount of pressure. He was able to get into a certain university, pass some classes that were very difficult, and I knew they were difficult to pass, and they were able to process information at a certain level, maybe in the 90th percentile of the population. And in an analysis or consulting job, that's a very important skill. And I don't even know if it's right to call a skill. You might even be born with this. But I think it's filtering those individuals who have the ability to process information quickly and efficiently and correctly, and delivering them to employers. I think universities more acted out like a filter in order to select and sort of put together the smartest people in every room in every high school than anything. And then post challenges, because a lot of people during university quit, they're not able to pass courses, they change their major. And so kind of weeding out the most conscientious, hardest working, highest IQ people in a given class every year.
I wouldn't say I agree 100% with you, but I guess that's probably because of the different backgrounds in a sense, because I guess for finance, it's like that, because then when you get out of university, you have to keep dealing with those kind of environment, like super high pressure, dealing with money. Whereas, I don't know, for example, in my case, even though it's economic, I have an economics background, so it's kind of related. And I've always been in the university environment. I'm still working in the university. So I kind of like, I wouldn't agree with you just because it probably would take out some value from what you're doing in those 3 years. It's not, I mean, it is about dealing with challenges and the pressure, and that's absolutely true. But I think also what you learn, like the specific things that you learn, they are important as well, because in particular, then they might focus you on what you like more. I know it may change after you graduate, but at least at the beginning, you can kind of sort of select where you want to go and the place you want to go. Let's say the topic you want to go for, in particular, if you want to stay in academia. If I agreed with you, I would just kind of take out some value from that, in a sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I was giving the information from the perspective of an employer. So, for example, if I was an employer, why do I select a Harvard graduate versus another graduate? Because in order to get into Harvard, you need to have as I said, a certain level of IQ, a certain level of processing ability, a certain level of background where you've overcome the hardest challenge. And at the end of the day, the value add occurs when you get hired, right? So you kind of need to say, okay, why does the employer hire me versus the other guy? And I think that where the university sort of gives you an edge is it proves or it gives an indicator to the employer, I think, that this person was able to overcome the most difficult challenges that he was thrown at between the ages of 18 and 22. And he handled it. So now he's ready to handle your money if you teach him. But when I look at the level of forgetting of courses, and when I look at my own career, I would say most of the information that I learned, I don't think I could even learn at university because the challenges were so specific. So, for example, for the Amazon HQ, the company was looking to purchase a baseball stadium in New Jersey. We had to talk to the mayor. I had to prepare reports in order to deliver to the mayor. I had to watch the political situation. We had to go to events where we had to speak to other bureaucrats and get them enrolled into selling the baseball stadium to us at cost, at whatever it cost them to build, and it was going to be demolished. So there were all these factors that I don't think it's so situation specific that I don't think you can learn. All you can do is kind of be challenged and be ready for anything. And you might be at with school or without school, but I think a university education, at least I suspect, allows the employer to sort of get that information. But yeah, definitely like the information that you learn, absolutely, it's applicable in jobs. It's applicable in the real world too. The only downside is I think you forget most of it by the time you graduate.
Moving on, you just mentioned your project about the Amazon headquarters. If you consider it as a failure or something you can learn from.
I wouldn't call it a failure, because I mean even New York City didn't get it. And I would say that it was a good effort. We made a very good proposal, and it was shortlisted out of hundreds of cities down to, I believe, 22 cities. Our project was among that 22, which is in of itself is an achievement. Finally, New York City and Washington were the final two, and then New York City, and they were going to build in New York City, but because of the politics, even New York City was canceled and they moved the whole thing to Washington. I think in life there are a lot of things that are out of your control. I can't control the tax rates in New Jersey. I can't control the tax rates in New York. I can't control geography. Because of that, I would say that all you can do is kind of try your best. But definitely I wouldn't say it was a failure because, well, you need to kind of make a mistake in order to fail, right? And if there's a factor like tax break that you have no control over, then you can't change the outcome. If something doesn't happen because of a factor that you couldn't influence, did you really fail? So I don't think so. So it's hard to say. I don't think it was my personal failure at all. There are 1,000 different factors in these things.
You would say that if you could come back to that moment, you wouldn't change anything.
No. I mean, also my work is edited and checked by a bunch of people. So it's not just me making decisions, many people with a lot of experience as well, deciding together as a group. But yeah, we delivered the best that could. I don't think anything more would have sufficed because I think they selected queens out of geography. They didn't account for the politics that they were going into, dealing with AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is a famous U.S. politician. They were going into her district, and she's a social democrat. So of course she didn't want big business moving into her neighborhood, and she wrecked the deal. And if they had known that they were about to walk into that situation, I think they would have gone with us. So that they didn't account for the political factor. They thought they would be welcome, But as soon as they signed that deal, the New York City politicians began attacking, and they pulled back because they could. They had the power. I wouldn't have done anything differently. I think that it wasn't a failure. Like I gave the best information that I could to everyone.
But is there anything that this experience has taught you?
Yeah, no one knows anything for sure. Experts are wrong. I mean, a committee is wrong. You can put 100 people at the table, all 100 of them can decide and make the very wrong, consequentially wrong decisions. And I see this all the time, and I'm sure that I make incorrect decisions myself. Very smart people collectively can make very wrong decisions too. So it's taught me that. It's taught me that you should always take information with a grain of salt. You should assess, analyze, make your own decisions for you, and not sort of trust the group or trust experts all the time. And that's what I try to do. And really try to speak with people smarter than myself, all because I really think being exposed to people who are where you want to be or who are smarter than you, and you're aware that they're smarter than you, are whom you should speak in life. And that process somehow naturally just takes you where you want to go. And you should always kind of make your own decision, but receive as many inputs as you can from people who are smarter than and more experienced. So take the expert advice, but decide yourself.
So I think that the main topic of this interview has been just put yourself in a really good environment with smart people, with ambitious people, which can make you grow, which can support you in take your path, in take your decision.
Exactly, and challenge you, because I think when someone is sort of supporting you, holding you by the hand, it's nice, but I think people who kind of hold your hand and let it go, let you walk. I think that's been kind of my positive experience. Is every time that I've worked anywhere, I've looked at what the other guys are doing, I've looked at what the other analysts are doing, I've learned their models by heart, for example, and then I've added my perspective, and that was sort of my plus one brick into building a house, for example. I would say that yes, supportive environments help, but challenging environments help. I would.
So it's as usual the classic concept again of the getting out of the comfort zone.
Yes.
Always be challenged. Always don't rest just because you think you're the best, but always keep again challenging yourself and getting into things that you might not be comfortable with.
Which is the main point of our community.
Yeah, exactly.
So I like that this is the main topic of this interview. It's kind of related to what we are currently doing. Hopefully people will appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely.
For the last question, so now you are CFO at the Garex Industry, right? But at the same time, you are really young. You are 31, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How you feel about that?
It feels great. I mean, Garex isn't end all be all. I'm also taking this time with coronavirus and quarantines to work on a personal startup that I've been thinking about for a long time. I'm able to read a lot of the books that I've been meaning to read. So I've really focused on self-improvement and learning more about the projects that I've been wanting to learn about. Garex is doing great. It's growing.
Let us know about your startup, and we hope that our community could be helpful in some way. Our guests and everyone who will be part of the community, you could find some talented guy who could help you with some stuff.
Absolutely. I'll tell you about it as soon as it's up and running.
Which brings us to our last question.
Oh yeah,
Super last question,
of course, right.
which we kind of always do at the end. So we would be incredibly happy if you'd like to join our community. Speaking about, in particular, when you want to talk about your startup. So we would be incredibly happy if you'd like to join.
Absolutely, guys. I look forward to the Facebook invite.
Great. I mean, that's absolutely great. And could you tell us at least the kind of field of your startup?
Oh, so yeah, for sure. The field of the startup will be about finance. So I think there are a lot of opportunities to invest in, for example, developing economies. Many people in the US or around the world don't have access to great deals that are happening in developing economies. But this is where most of the wage growth and most of the infrastructure growth will be happening next. I think these countries do not have advanced financial in place yet. Yet there are a lot of smaller companies that need finance. So my startup will focus on getting those companies the financing that they need through investors that want to invest in smaller companies that need money in order to get their operation.
Can we share this part on YouTube?
Sure, no problem. Yeah.
I mean, that's great. That's great. So thank you very much, Eser. I've been so happy to talk again with you. Thank you very much. I really appreciated your availability.
Yeah, for sure, guys. Good to talk to you too, Simone.
Well, so this is Andrea, Simone, and Eser. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you again very soon.
Sounds good. See you soon.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.